The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken promises. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, my hands trembling as I signed the final papers. 27 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Harold was gone, his heart giving out just 3 months ago, leaving me with more money than I'd ever dreamed of and a daughter who suddenly cared about my well-being. "Mrs. Patterson, are you certain about these changes?" Henderson asked, his gray eyes searching mine through wire-rimmed glasses. "This is quite different from your original will." I nodded, thinking about the conversation I'd overheard just last week. My daughter Lisa and her husband Derek whispering in my kitchen while I pretended to nap in my chair. Their voices had carried through the thin walls of my modest home, the same home Harold and I had raised Lisa in, the same home where she'd brought Derek 5 years ago with stars in her eyes and promises of grandchildren. "Mom's getting older," Lisa had whispered to Derek. "The doctor said her memory isn't what it used to be. Maybe we should start handling her finances." Derek's response had chilled me to the bone. "That old bat is sitting on $2 million from your dad's life insurance and investments. She doesn't need all that money. Hell, she can barely remember to take her pills." I'd kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady, while my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. This was the man I'd welcomed into my family, the man I'd cooked Sunday dinners for, the man who called me Mom with what I thought was genuine affection. "We need to be smart about this," Derek had continued. "Get her to sign a power of attorney, maybe move some of that money into our account for safekeeping. She trusts us completely." Lisa had been quiet for a moment, and I'd held my breath, hoping my daughter would defend me. Instead, she'd said, "You're right. She does trust us, maybe too much." The memory made my stomach turn as I sat in Henderson's office, watching him organize the new documents. I'd trusted them too much, all right. Trusted them with my spare key, my bank account numbers, my deepest fears about growing old alone. I'd even told Lisa about the safe deposit box where Harold kept the original will, the one that left everything to her. "The new will is ironclad," Henderson assured me. "Everything goes to the American Cancer Society and the local animal shelter, just as you requested. Your daughter will receive only the contents of your jewelry box and your grandmother's china." I thought about my grandmother's china, the delicate pink roses painted on each piece. Lisa had always admired it, and I'd planned to give it to her anyway. But Derek wouldn't be getting his greedy hands on Harold's life's work. The small construction company Harold had built from nothing, the investments he'd made so carefully over the years. "What about the house?" I asked. "That will be sold, with proceeds going to the charities as well," Henderson confirmed. "However, you retain the right to live there until your death, and you can change the will at any time if circumstances changed." If circumstances changed? I almost laughed at the irony. Circumstances had already changed, dramatically, the moment I'd heard my daughter and son-in-law plotting to steal my inheritance while I was still breathing. I left Henderson's office with copies of the new will tucked safely in my purse, along with a new set of keys to a safe deposit box Derek and Lisa knew nothing about. The original will, the one they thought would make them rich, was still in the old box. Let them find it when the time came. Let them think they'd won. But I wasn't done yet. If Derek wanted to play games, I'd show him what a real game looked like. That evening I called Lisa. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking about what you said last week about helping me with my finances. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need some help." I could hear the excitement in her voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you called. Derek and I have been worried about you managing everything alone." "Well, I trust you both completely," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Why don't you and Derek come over this weekend? We can go through my papers together, and you can help me organize everything." "That's wonderful, Mom. We'll be there Saturday morning." After I hung up, I sat in Harold's old recliner, staring at the family photo on the mantel. Lisa at 16, gap-toothed and grinning, Derek not yet in the picture. Where had I gone wrong? When had my daughter become someone I didn't recognize? Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. I'd spent the morning baking Lisa's favorite cookies, chocolate chip with walnuts, just like I used to make when she was little. The kitchen smelled like comfort and memories, a sharp contrast to the betrayal simmering in my chest. Derek arrived first, his silver BMW gleaming in my driveway like a promise of the wealth he thought he'd soon possess. He was handsome in a slick way, with perfectly styled hair and teeth too white to be natural. He'd charmed me completely when Lisa first brought him home, with his easy smile and practiced compliments about my cooking. "Mom!" He wrapped me in a hug that felt calculated now, knowing what I knew. "You look wonderful. That new haircut really suits you." I'd gotten my hair done yesterday, thinking it might be one of the last times I'd bother with such vanities. At 72, I was tired of pretending things were normal when my world had shifted on its axis. Lisa arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a stack of manila folders and wearing the kind of determined expression I remembered from her childhood when she'd set her mind on something. She'd been a stubborn child, always sure she knew best, but I'd loved her fierce independence. Now that same stubbornness was being used against me. "Mom, I brought some forms for you to look at," she said, setting the folders on my kitchen table. "Just some basic stuff to help us help you." I poured coffee and arranged the cookies on Harold's mother's good china, the set I'd promised Lisa years ago. Derek's eyes lit up when he saw the delicate cups, probably calculating their antique value. "These are beautiful," he said, running his finger along a gold rim. "They must be worth quite a bit." "They're priceless to me," I replied. "My Harold's mother gave them to me when we got married. She said they'd been in the family for generations." Lisa opened the first folder, revealing documents I recognized immediately. Power of attorney forms, bank account authorization papers, investment portfolio transfer documents. They'd done their homework. I had to give them that. "Now, Mom, these are just precautionary," Lisa said, her voice taking on the patient tone she used with her own children. "In case something happens to you, we want to make sure we can take care of things." "What kinds of things?" I asked, playing dumb. Derek leaned forward, his salesman smile in full force. "Well, paying bills, managing your investments, making sure your money is working for you. Lisa and I have been talking to a financial advisor about some opportunities that could really grow your nest egg." "I'll bet you have," I thought, but I nodded encouragingly. "That sounds wonderful. I've been so worried about making the right decisions." For the next hour, they walked me through each document, explaining in patronizing detail what my signature would authorize them to do: access my accounts, make investment decisions, sell my assets if necessary for my care and well-being. "This is a lot to process," I said finally, setting down my coffee cup. "I think I need to sleep on it." Derek's smile flickered, just for a moment, but Lisa jumped in smoothly. "Of course, Mom, this is a big decision, but maybe we could get started with just one or two of the smaller things, just to test the waters." I pretended to consider this, then nodded slowly. "I suppose that would be all right. Which ones did you have in mind?" They exchanged a look I wasn't supposed to catch, and Derek pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This one just gives us access to your checking account for emergencies, and this one lets us talk to your investment advisor about your portfolio." I looked at the papers, reading every line carefully, while they sat in barely contained excitement. The checking account form was legitimate, but the investment authorization was much broader than they'd described. It would give them the power to move money, change beneficiaries, and liquidate assets. "Well," I said finally, "I suppose there's no harm in it." I signed both documents with a trembling hand, watching Derek's face light up with what he thought was victory. Little did he know that the checking account contained exactly $847. 32, and the investment account they'd be accessing was a small CD worth about $3,000, money I'd moved just for this purpose. The real money, all $2.3 million of it, was safely tucked away in accounts they'd never heard of, managed by an investment firm in the next state. Harold had been paranoid about keeping all our eggs in one basket, a paranoia that was about to serve me well. "Thank you, Mom," Lisa said, giving me a hug that felt warmer than Derek's had earlier. For just a moment, I wondered if I was wrong about her, if maybe she really did care about my well-being. Then Derek spoke up. "We should probably get these filed right away, don't you think? Strike while the iron's hot?" And I knew I hadn't been wrong at all. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of phone calls and carefully orchestrated confusion. Derek called every other day, his voice dripping with false concern, as he asked about my finances and whether I needed any help managing my complex affairs. Each conversation was a masterclass in manipulation, and I played my part perfectly. "I'm just so confused about all these numbers," I'd tell him, letting my voice quaver just enough to sound convincing. "Harold always handled everything, and now I don't know where to turn." "Don't worry, Mom," Derek would reply, and I could practically hear him rubbing his hands together. "Lisa and I have everything under control. We've already started organizing your accounts, and we should have a complete picture of your assets within the week." What they had was a complete picture of exactly what I wanted them to see. The small checking account, the modest CD, and the savings account with about $15,000 that I deliberately left accessible. They thought they were being clever, slowly draining small amounts to test whether I'd notice. I noticed, of course. I noticed every penny. But I also noticed that they were getting bolder, more confident in their deception. Derek had started talking about investment opportunities and maximizing my returns, while Lisa had begun dropping hints about how expensive it was to maintain my old house. "The roof is going to need replacing soon," she'd mentioned during one of their visits, running her finger along the windowsill to collect dust. "And the furnace is making that noise again. Maybe it's time to think about downsizing, Mom. There are some lovely senior communities that would take much better care of you than this old place." Senior communities! The phrase made my blood boil. I'd lived in this house for 43 years, raised my daughter here, nursed my husband through this final illness here. The mortgage was paid off, the taxes were manageable, and I had enough money to maintain it for the rest of my life. But Derek and Lisa saw it as an inconvenient obstacle to their inheritance. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I'd been pretending to take a nap when I heard Derek's key in the front door. Had asked for a spare key months ago for emergencies, and I'd given it to him without thinking twice. Now I understood what kind of emergencies he'd had in mind. I heard him moving through the house, his footsteps creaking on the old hardwood floors. He went straight to Harold's study, where I kept the filing cabinet with my important papers. Through the crack in my bedroom door, I could see him rifling through the folders, photographing documents with his phone. My heart pounded as I watched him discover Harold's original will, the one that left everything to Lisa. He actually smiled as he photographed each page, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from confronting him right then and there. But Derek wasn't finished. He spent another 20 minutes going through my personal papers, photographing bank statements, insurance policies, and investment records. He even opened my jewelry box, the one Harold had given me for our 25th anniversary, and started taking pictures of the contents. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway before I got up, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about violation, about the complete destruction of trust and family bonds.
Derek hadn't just stolen my financial information, he'd stolen my privacy, my dignity, and my sense of security in my own home. That evening, I called Henderson. "I need to accelerate our timeline," I told him. "They're moving faster than I expected." "What's happened?" Henderson asked, his voice sharp with concern. I told him about Derek's unauthorized visit, about the photographed documents, about the way they were slowly draining my accessible accounts. Henderson listened without interruption, and I could hear him taking notes. "Mrs. Patterson, what they're doing is illegal. We could pursue criminal charges." "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far they'll go. But I need you to do something for me." "What do you need?" "I want you to prepare a document that looks like a codicil to my will. Something that would change a few small bequests, but leave the main inheritance intact. Date it for next week and make sure it's witnessed properly." Henderson was quiet for a moment. "You want them to think you're making changes that benefit them." "Exactly. And I want you to arrange for the document to be delivered to my house when I know they'll be there. Can you do that?" "It's highly irregular, but yes, I can arrange it." "Good, because I'm going to give Derek and Lisa exactly what they deserve." The following Saturday, I invited them over for lunch, claiming I had something important to discuss. I'd spent the morning cooking Lisa's favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans, the same meal I'd made for her birthday every year, until she got married and stopped caring about family traditions. They arrived together, Derek carrying a briefcase that I was certain contained papers he wanted me to sign.
Lisa brought flowers, yellow roses that she probably thought would soften me up for whatever scheme they had planned. "Mom, you look tired," Lisa said, studying my face with what might have been genuine concern. "Are you sleeping well?" "Oh, you know how it is," I replied, setting the flowers in Harold's mother's crystal vase. "I've been having some strange dreams lately, dreams about your father." Derek perked up at this. "Dreams can be very meaningful, Mom. What kind of dreams?" I turned to face him, noting the calculating look in his eyes. "Harold keeps telling me I need to be more careful with my money. He says I'm being too trusting, that people might try to take advantage of me." The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa and Derek exchanged a look that confirmed everything I'd suspected about their intentions. "Well, Derek," said finally, "dreams can be confusing sometimes. The important thing is that you have people who care about you, people you can trust to help you make good decisions." "That's exactly what Harold said," I replied. "He said I needed to be very careful about who I trust." Lunch was a tense affair, with Derek and Lisa making forced conversation while I played the part of the confused elderly woman. I asked them to explain the same things multiple times, pretended to forget details they'd just mentioned, and generally gave the impression that my mental faculties were declining rapidly. "Mom," Lisa said finally, "Derek and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to consider some changes for your own good." "What kind of changes?" Derek opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "We found a wonderful assisted living facility just 20 minutes from our house. They provide meals, housekeeping, medication management, everything you need to be comfortable and safe." I stared at the brochures he spread across my kitchen table. Sunny Meadows Senior Living, Golden Years Retirement Community, Sunset Manor Independent Living, each one promising comfort, security, and peace of mind for families who could no longer care for their elderly relatives. "I don't understand," I said, though I understood perfectly. "Why would I need to move? I'm perfectly fine here." "Mom, you're not fine," Lisa said, her voice taking on that patient tone again. "You've been forgetting things, getting confused about money. Last week you told me you couldn't remember writing 3 different checks." I hadn't told her any such thing, but I let it slide. "I've been a little scattered lately," I admitted, "but I don't want to leave my home."
"It's not safe for you to live alone anymore," Derek said, leaning forward with his practiced expression of concern. "What if you fell and couldn't get help? What if you forgot to turn off the stove?" "These places are really nice, Mom," Lisa added. "You'd have your own apartment, but with all the support you need, and we'd visit all the time." I looked at the brochures, noting the monthly fees listed in small print. $4,000 a month.
5,000? 6,000. With my supposed assets, I could afford maybe 6 months before the money ran out and I'd be transferred to whatever low-income facility had an opening. "It's a lot to think about," I said finally. "Of course it is," Derek replied, "but we've already made some inquiries, and there might be a waiting list. We'd need to move quickly to secure a spot." A waiting list, of course. They'd already been planning this, already been shopping my future, while I was still very much alive and capable of making my own decisions. "I suppose I should look at my finances first," I said. "Make sure I can afford something like this." Derek's smile was predatory. "Actually, Mom, we've been doing some research on that front, too. With your current assets, and if we sell the house, you'd have more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life." More than enough? I almost laughed. They had no idea what my actual assets were, and they were already planning to liquidate my home to pay for the prison they wanted to put me in. Just then, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. "I'll get it," I said, but Derek was already standing. "I'll go, Mom. You shouldn't be opening the door to strangers." He returned a moment later with Henderson, who was carrying an official-looking envelope and wearing his most professional expression. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm Robert Henderson from Henderson & Associates. I have some documents that require your immediate attention." Lisa and Derek froze. This wasn't part of their plan. "Documents?" I asked, playing confused. "What kind of documents?" "It's regarding your will, Mrs. Patterson. There's been a request for modification that needs to be processed today." Derek stepped forward. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Patterson isn't in any condition to be making legal decisions right now. Perhaps you should come back when she's feeling better." Henderson looked at Derek with the kind of professional disdain that only lawyers can master. "And you are?" "Derek Morrison, Mrs. Patterson's son-in-law. I'm helping her manage her affairs." "I see. Well, Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Patterson appears to be perfectly lucid to me, and this document requires her signature today, as per her previous instructions." I took the envelope from Henderson, noting how Derek's face had gone completely white. Inside was the fake codicil we'd prepared, the one that would appear to give Derek and Lisa what they wanted, while actually changing nothing important. "What does it say, Mom?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. I pretended to read the document, letting my eyes widen with confusion. "I don't understand all these legal terms. Something about beneficiaries and amendments?" Henderson stepped in smoothly. "It's quite simple, Mrs. Patterson. This document modifies your will to ensure that your daughter and son-in-law receive additional consideration for their care and assistance. It's a standard codicil that many of our clients use to reward family members who go above and beyond." Derek's face went from white to red to white again. He thought he was about to get everything he'd been scheming for. "Should I sign it?" I asked, looking between Derek and Lisa. "Yes," Derek said quickly. "Yes, you should definitely sign it." I signed the fake codicil with a trembling hand, watching Derek's face transform with what he thought was victory. Henderson witnessed the signature, notarized the document, and left with promises that the paperwork would be filed within the week. After he left, Derek and Lisa exchanged a look of pure triumph. "Mom," Lisa said, her voice warm with what sounded like genuine affection, "you did the right thing. We're going to take such good care of you." If only she knew what I'd actually just signed. The next month was a study in barely contained greed.
Derek's behavior became increasingly brazen, as if the fake codicil had given him permission to drop his pretense of caring about my well-being. He started showing up at my house uninvited, rifling through my belongings with the confidence of someone who already owned everything he touched. "Mom, we need to talk about this china cabinet," he said during one of his unexpected visits. "Some of these pieces are really valuable. Maybe we should get them appraised for insurance purposes." I watched him handle Harold's grandmother's tea service, the one Harold had promised would stay in the family forever. Derek turned each piece over, looking for maker's marks and signatures, calculating their worth with the cold efficiency of an auctioneer. "They're just old dishes," I said, though my heart was breaking. "Harold's family wasn't wealthy. Nothing there is worth much." "You'd be surprised," Derek replied, photographing a delicate cream pitcher. "Antiques are hot right now. Even modest pieces can bring good money from the right collector." Lisa had started dropping by every few days, ostensibly to check on me, but really to inventory my possessions. She'd walk through the house with her phone, taking pictures of furniture, artwork, and decorative objects. When I asked her about it, she claimed she was documenting things for the insurance company. "We want to make sure everything is properly protected," she explained, snapping photos of Harold's war medals. "If something were to happen to the house, we'd need a complete record for the insurance claim." Something like a fire, I thought, or a convenient accident that would eliminate the need to maintain the property while I was tucked away in their chosen senior facility. But the real shock came when I discovered they'd been in contact with real estate agents. I found the business card on my kitchen counter, wedged between the salt and pepper shakers where Derek had obviously left it by mistake. "Rebecca Martinez, Coldwell banker, specializing in estate sales and senior relocations." I called the number, pretending to be a neighbor interested in property values. "Oh, you must be asking about the Patterson house," Rebecca said cheerfully. "Yes, I've been working with the family on that listing. It's a lovely property, though it needs some updating. Are you interested in the neighborhood?" "I might be," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "When is it supposed to go on the market?" "Well, there are some family considerations to work through first, but we're hoping to list it within the next few weeks. It's a sad situation, really. The elderly owner needs to move to assisted living, and the family is trying to make the transition as smooth as possible." The elderly owner? As if I were already dead and buried. I hung up the phone with trembling hands, finally understanding the full scope of their plan. They weren't just stealing my money, they were stealing my entire life. My home, my independence, my right to make my own decisions about my future. That evening, I called Henderson again. "They're moving faster than I expected," I told him. "I need to accelerate our timeline." "What's the situation?" I told him about the real estate agent, about Derek's increasingly aggressive behavior, about Lisa's systematic cataloging of my belongings. Henderson listened in silence, and I could hear him taking notes. "Mrs. Patterson, I have to ask, are you certain you want to see this through? What you're planning will destroy your relationship with your daughter permanently." I looked around my living room, at the family photos that showed happier times, at the furniture Harold and I had chosen together, at the life we'd built with such care and love. She destroyed our relationship the moment she decided to treat me like a bank account instead of her mother. All right then, I'll prepare the final documents, but I want you to consider one more thing. We could simply reveal the truth now, let them know you've discovered their plans. It might be enough to shock them back to their senses. "No," I said firmly. "I want them to experience exactly what they were planning to do to me. I want them to understand what betrayal feels like." Henderson sighed. "Very well. I'll have everything ready by Friday." Friday came with the first snow of the season, a light dusting that made everything look clean and new.
I spent the morning baking, preparing what I knew would be my last family dinner in this house. Not because I was leaving, but because after today, Derek and Lisa would never be welcome here again. They arrived at noon, Derek carrying a bottle of champagne and Lisa bringing a store-bought cake. The champagne was expensive, probably purchased with money they'd stolen from my accounts, and the cake was from the bakery where I'd ordered all of Lisa's birthday cakes when she was growing up. "What's the occasion?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "We have some wonderful news," Derek said, his smile so bright it could have lit up the entire neighborhood. "The assisted living facility called. They have an opening, and they can take you next week." "Next week?" I let my voice rise with what sounded like panic. "But I'm not ready."
I haven't packed anything. I haven't— Don't worry, Mom, Lisa interrupted, patting my hand with the kind of condescending affection you'd show a confused child. We've already started making arrangements. The movers can pack everything you need, and we'll take care of the rest. The rest. My entire life reduced to the rest. But what about the house? All my things? Derek popped the champagne, the cork flying across my kitchen with celebratory violence. We've got that covered too. The realtor thinks we can get a great price, especially if we stage it properly. And anything you don't need at the facility, we'll make sure gets donated to charity. Donated to charity? I wondered if they'd claim tax deductions for giving away my possessions. "I don't know if I'm ready for such a big change," I said, accepting the glass of champagne Derek offered. "Change is always scary," Lisa said, "but sometimes it's necessary. You'll love it there, Mom. They have activities, social events, even a book club." A book club? As if reading with strangers could replace the life I'd built over 7 decades. We sat down to dinner, and I listened to them chatter about their plans for my future. They'd already chosen my apartment, a 1-bedroom unit with a kitchenette and space for essential furniture only. They'd arranged for my car to be sold, since residents weren't allowed to drive. They'd even contacted my doctor to arrange for my medical records to be transferred to the facility's staff physician. "We want to make sure you have everything you need," Derek said, cutting into the roast beef I'd spent all morning preparing. "The facility has its own medical staff, its own pharmacy, its own activities director. You won't have to worry about anything." Won't have to worry about anything because I won't be allowed to make any decisions about anything. "There is one small matter we need to discuss," Lisa said, pulling out a manila folder. "The facility requires a significant deposit, and we'll need to access your main accounts to cover the costs." Here it comes, I thought, the final play. Derek opened the folder, revealing documents that would give them complete control over my finances. "It's just a formality," he said. "Since you'll be in managed care, they prefer to work directly with family members on payment issues." I pretended to read the documents, letting my eyes widen with confusion. "This gives you permission to access all my accounts?" "Only to pay for your care," Lisa said quickly. "We'd never use your money for anything else." Never use my money for anything else? The lie was so brazen I almost laughed. "I suppose it makes sense," I said finally. "I trust you both completely." I signed the documents with a shaking hand, watching Derek's face light up with triumph. In his mind, he'd just gained access to $2.3 million. In reality, he'd just signed his own confession. "There's something else," Derek said, pulling out another set of papers. These are just some additional authorizations to make sure we can handle any unexpected expenses. The additional authorizations were even more comprehensive than the first set. They gave Derek and Lisa power of attorney over my medical decisions, my legal affairs, and my property. If I signed these documents, they could have me committed to a mental health facility, sell my house without my consent, and make decisions about my medical care that I might not agree with. "This is a lot of responsibility for you both," I said, staring at the papers. "We're happy to do it," Lisa said. "We love you, Mom." "We love you, Mom." The words I'd been longing to hear twisted into a weapon of manipulation. I signed the second set of documents, noting how Derek's hands were actually trembling with excitement. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully manipulated a confused old woman into signing away her entire life. "Well," I said, setting down the pen, "I guess that's everything." "Not quite," Derek said, his voice thick with barely contained greed. "There's one more thing we need to discuss." He pulled out a third folder, this one containing copies of Harold's original will. "We found this in your filing cabinet, Mom. It's your husband's will, and it leaves everything to Lisa." I looked at the document, pretending to be surprised. I'd forgotten about that. "The thing is," Derek continued, "this will is outdated. It doesn't account for your current situation, your need for managed care, or the costs associated with your future medical needs." "What does that mean?" Lisa leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "It means we need to make sure the inheritance is structured properly. Derek has been talking to a financial advisor, and there are some tax advantages to transferring assets before someone goes into managed care." Tax advantages? I was sure there were, especially for the people doing the transferring. "We're not talking about taking anything that belongs to you," Derek said. "We're talking about smart financial planning that benefits everyone." Smart financial planning, like the smart financial planning that had led to my checking account being systematically drained over the past month. "What would you need me to do?" I asked. Derek smiled, and for a moment he looked like the charming man who'd swept my daughter off her feet 5 years ago. "Just sign a few transfer documents, nothing major, just enough to optimize the tax situation and ensure that your care is fully funded." A few transfer documents, documents that would move my assets into their names immediately, rather than waiting for my death. "I don't know," I said, letting uncertainty creep into my voice. "It sounds complicated." "It's not complicated at all," Lisa said. "We've already prepared everything. All you need to do is sign." They'd already prepared everything. Of course they had. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Well," I said finally, "if you think it's best."
Derek pulled out the final set of documents, and I could see his hands shaking with anticipation. These were the real papers, the ones that would transfer ownership of my house, my investments, my bank accounts, everything Harold and I had worked for over 47 years of marriage. I picked up the pen, pretending to read the first document. "This transfers the house to both of you?" "It transfers ownership, but you retain the right to live there until you move to the facility," Derek explained. "It's just a legal formality." A legal formality that would leave me homeless and destitute if I didn't play along with their plans. I signed the first document, then the second, then the third. With each signature, Derek's smile grew wider, and Lisa's eyes grew brighter. They thought they were watching a confused old woman signing away her life. They had no idea they were watching a master class in strategic patience. "There," I said, setting down the pen. "Is that everything?" "That's everything," Derek said, gathering up the documents with barely controlled excitement. "We'll get these filed first thing Monday morning." Monday morning. In their minds, they'd be millionaires by Monday afternoon. "I should probably start packing," I said, looking around my kitchen as if seeing it for the last time. "Don't worry about that," Lisa said, patting my hand again. "We'll take care of everything. You just focus on getting ready for your new adventure." My new adventure. Locked away in a facility I'd never chosen, stripped of my independence and my dignity, while they lived in luxury on money Harold and I had saved penny by penny. After they left, I sat in Harold's chair and looked at the family photos on the mantel.
Lisa at 5, missing her front teeth. Lisa at 16, dressed for her first formal dance. Lisa at 22, graduating from college with the degree Harold and I had sacrificed to pay for. Lisa at 27, walking down the aisle in the wedding dress I'd helped her choose. When had she stopped being my daughter and become my enemy? I reached for the phone and dialed Henderson's number. "It's done," I told him when he answered. "They've signed everything." "All of it?" "Every single document. They think they've just stolen $2.3 million and a house worth $400,000. Henderson was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Patterson, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we execute the final phase, there's no going back." I thought about Derek's greedy smile, about Lisa's calculated affection, about the way they'd systematically planned to destroy my life while pretending to care about my well-being. "I'm certain," I said. "Do it." "I'll make the calls tonight," Henderson said. "Everything will be in motion by Monday morning." I hung up the phone and walked through my house one more time, touching the furniture Harold and I had chosen together, running my fingers along the walls we'd painted when Lisa was in high school. This would always be my home, no matter what Derek and Lisa thought they'd accomplished today. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of November weather that made you want to stay inside with a cup of tea and a good book. I was doing exactly that when the phone rang at 9:47 a.m. "Mom?" Lisa's voice was tight with confusion. "I just got a call from the bank. They said there's some kind of problem with the account transfers." "What kind of problem?" I asked, settling deeper into Harold's chair. "They said the accounts we were trying to access don't exist, but that's impossible. We have all the paperwork, all the account numbers." I took a sip of my tea, savoring the moment. That does sound strange. "Derek is on his way to the bank now. There must be some mistake." There was no mistake, of course. The accounts Derek and Lisa had been slowly draining were real, but they contained only the money I'd deliberately placed there for them to find. The accounts they thought they'd just gained access to through Saturday's document signing were also real, but had been closed months ago, their contents transferred to new accounts at different banks entirely. "I'm sure Derek will sort it out," I said. "He's very good with financial matters." "Yes, he is," Lisa agreed, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. An hour later, Derek called. His voice was strained, barely controlled. "Mom, we need to talk. There seems to be some confusion about your financial situation." "What kind of confusion?" "The bank says some of your accounts have been closed, and the ones that are still open don't have the balances we expected." "Oh my," I said, injecting just the right amount of worry into my voice. "That doesn't sound right at all." "No, it doesn't. Can we come over? We need to go through your paperwork again." "Of course, dear. I'll put the coffee on." They arrived within 20 minutes, Derek's usually perfect hair disheveled and Lisa's face pale with worry. Derek was carrying a briefcase full of the documents they thought gave them control over my finances, while Lisa clutched a manila folder containing printouts from their morning at the bank. "Mom, we need to figure out what's going on," Derek said without preamble. "According to the bank, most of your accounts either don't exist or have been closed." I looked at the papers they spread across my kitchen table, recognizing the account numbers I'd given them months ago. "These are my account numbers," I said, pointing to the documents. "Harold always kept very careful records." "But they're not working," Lisa said, her voice rising with frustration. "The bank says these accounts were closed in September." September? 2 months ago, right around the time I'd first overheard their conversation about my declining mental state and their plans to help me manage my money. "That's very strange," I said. "I don't remember closing any accounts." Derek leaned forward, his salesman smile replaced by something harder, more desperate. "Mom, this is important."
We need to find out where your money went. All of it.
"All of what?"
Your inheritance from Harold, the life insurance money, your investment accounts. According to these records, you should have over $2 million, but we can only find about 20,000 in accessible funds. I let my face crumple with confusion and worry. I don't understand. Harold always said I'd be taken care of. Are you saying the money is gone? Lisa reached across the table and took my hand. We're going to figure this out, Mom. Maybe you moved the money and forgot about it. Maybe Harold had accounts you don't know about. Maybe Harold had accounts I don't know about. If only they knew how close to the truth that was. I should call the bank, I said, reaching for the phone. We already called, Derek said quickly. They can't give us any information because we're not on the accounts. You'll need to call them yourself or come in person with proper identification. I nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to me. Should we go there now? Yes, Derek said, gathering up the papers. Let's go right now. The drive to the bank was tense, with Derek gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, and Lisa sitting in the back seat making phone calls to other financial institutions. I sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the familiar scenery pass by, and thinking about how Harold would have enjoyed this moment. At the bank, we were ushered into a small conference room, where Margaret Walsh, the branch manager, reviewed my account information with the kind of professional sympathy reserved for confused elderly customers and their concerned families. Mrs. Patterson, Margaret said gently, these accounts were all closed in September at your request. You came in personally with proper identification and transfer instructions. I did? I let my voice shake with uncertainty. I don't remember that at all. Derek leaned forward. Are you sure it was Mrs. Patterson? Maybe someone forged her identification or... It was definitely Mrs. Patterson, Margaret interrupted. I handled the transactions myself. She was very clear about what she wanted to do with the funds. What did she want to do with them? Lisa asked. Margaret looked at me, then back at Derek and Lisa. I'm sorry, but I can't discuss the details of those transactions with anyone but Mrs. Patterson herself. It's all right, I said, patting Lisa's hand. They're my family. They're just trying to help me. Margaret nodded sympathetically. Mrs. Patterson, you transferred all the funds to new accounts at First National Bank. You said you wanted to consolidate your assets for easier management. First National Bank? Derek and Lisa exchanged a look of relief. They thought they'd found their treasure. Do you remember doing that, Mom? Lisa asked. I pressed my fingertips to my temples, as if trying to recall something just out of reach. I think so. Maybe. It's all very fuzzy. We should go to First National right away, Derek said, standing up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. But First National was a dead end, too. Yes, Mrs. Patterson had opened accounts there in September. No, those accounts had been closed in October, with all funds transferred to another institution. No, they couldn't provide details about where the money had gone without proper authorization. We spent the rest of the day driving from bank to bank, following a paper trail that led nowhere. With each stop, Derek grew more agitated, and Lisa became more suspicious. By evening, they'd confirmed that my money existed but was completely inaccessible to them. Mom, Lisa said as we sat in my kitchen after our fruitless day of searching, we need to know what happened to your money, all of it. I looked at her, this woman who'd once been my little girl, who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms and asked me to check for monsters under her bed. Now she was the monster, hunting through my life for assets she could steal. I'm not sure, I said honestly. Everything has been so confusing since your father died. Derek slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups jump. This is ridiculous! The money has to be somewhere! Derek, Lisa said sharply, but he was beyond caring about appearances. Don't you understand? He said, his voice rising. Without that money, we can't afford the assisted living facility. We can't afford any of this.
Lisa's face went white. "Derek, stop!" But Derek was past the point of no return. "We've already signed the contracts, Lisa. We've already made commitments based on that inheritance." Commitments? I wondered what kinds of commitments they'd made with money they didn't actually have yet. "What commitments?" I asked quietly. Derek ran his hands through his hair, destroying what was left of his perfect styling. "The facility required a deposit, $50,000 non-refundable. And we had to put down earnest money on the house we wanted to buy once we sold this place." They'd been so confident of their scheme that they'd already spent money they didn't have, banking on their ability to steal my inheritance before anyone discovered their fraud. "How much earnest money?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. $30,000, Derek admitted. "But it's fine. We'll get it all back once we find her money." Lisa stared at him in horror. "Derek, that's our entire savings account, our children's college fund." "It's an investment in our future," Derek snapped. "Once we get control of her assets, we'll be set for life." Once they got control of my assets, there it was, finally out in the open. No more pretense about my well-being or their concern for my safety, just raw, naked greed. "I think I need to lie down," I said, standing up slowly. "This has been a very overwhelming day." "Mom, wait," Lisa said, but I was already walking toward my bedroom. "We'll figure this out," I called over my shoulder. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for everything."
There was indeed a reasonable explanation. They just weren't going to like it. I lay in my bed, listening to Derek and Lisa argue in increasingly desperate whispers in my kitchen. Through the thin walls, I could hear Derek's panic as he calculated their financial exposure, and Lisa's growing realization that their scheme had somehow gone terribly wrong. "We have to find that money," Derek kept saying. "It has to be somewhere." "Maybe we should call a lawyer," Lisa suggested. "With what money? We've spent everything on deposits we can't get back." Their argument continued for another hour before they finally left, promising to return the next day with a plan to sort everything out. I waited until I heard Derek's BMW pull out of my driveway before I called Henderson. "Phase 1 is complete," I told him. "They've discovered that their scheme isn't working." "How are they handling it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Derek's having a breakdown, and Lisa is starting to realize what they've gotten themselves into." "Are you ready for Phase 2? I thought about the desperate look in Derek's eyes, about the way Lisa had stared at him when she realized he'd gambled their children's future on his ability to steal from me. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready. The process server will be there tomorrow morning at 10. Make sure you're home." "I'll be here." "Mrs. Patterson, once this starts, they'll know you've been aware of their plans all along. They'll know you've been playing them from the beginning." I looked around my bedroom, at the pictures of Lisa on my dresser, at the jewelry box Derek had been photographing, at the life I'd built and they'd tried to steal. "Good," I said. "I want them to know exactly what I think of their betrayal." After I hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Harold's chair, watching the snow fall outside my living room window. Tomorrow, Derek and Lisa would learn that stealing from family comes with consequences they'd never imagined. I could hardly wait. Tuesday morning brought more snow and a knock on my door at exactly 10 o'clock. I answered it wearing my best dress, the navy blue one Harold had always said made my eyes look younger, and invited the process server in for coffee. "Mrs. Patterson?" the young man asked, consulting his clipboard. "I have documents for Derek Morrison and Lisa Morrison Patterson." "They're not here right now," I said, "but they should be arriving any minute. Please, come in and warm up." As if on cue, Derek's BMW pulled into my driveway. I watched through the window as he and Lisa hurried up my front walk, their faces tight with the kind of determination that comes from a sleepless night of scheming.
"Mom," Lisa called as she came through the front door, "we've been thinking all night, and we have some ideas about—" She stopped short when she saw the stranger in my living room. "Derek Morrison and Lisa Morrison Patterson?" the process server asked politely. "Yes," Derek said slowly, his eyes darting between the man and me.
"Who's asking?" the young man said, handing each of them a thick manila envelope. "Have a good day." Derek and Lisa stood frozen in my foyer, holding the envelopes like they contained explosives. In a way, they did. "What is this?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I think you should open them and find out," I said, settling into Harold's chair with my coffee. Derek tore open his envelope first, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally stark terror as he read the documents inside. Lisa opened hers more slowly, as if delaying the inevitable could somehow change what was written there. "This is a lawsuit," Derek said, his voice cracking. "You're suing us for fraud, theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy." "I am, indeed," I said calmly. Lisa looked up from her papers, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm doing exactly what you two have been doing to me for months. I'm taking legal action to protect my interests." Derek sank onto my couch, the papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. You knew all along." "I knew from the moment I overheard you planning to steal my inheritance while I pretended to nap in my kitchen. I knew when you started photographing my personal documents. I knew when you contacted real estate agents about selling my house. I knew when you forged my signature on bank documents." Lisa's face went white. "We never forged your signature." "Didn't you?" I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping hidden in Harold's desk. "These are copies of withdrawal slips from my checking account, with signatures that look remarkably like mine, but aren't quite right. Amazing what a handwriting expert can determine when they put their mind to it." Derek started laughing, a harsh sound that held no humor. "You played us. You actually played us. I gave you exactly what you gave me. Lies, manipulation, and false promises." "But we're family," Lisa cried. "I'm your daughter." "You stopped being my daughter the moment you decided to treat me like a bank account instead of a human being." I stood up and walked to my filing cabinet, pulling out another folder. "Would you like to know where my money really is? It's safe in accounts you've never heard of, managed by an investment firm you've never met, protected by legal documents you'll never see. All $2.7 million of it." $2.7 million! Derek's voice was barely a whisper. "But we thought—" "You thought there was only $2.3 million. That was Harold's life insurance and our original savings. But Harold was smarter than either of you gave him credit for. He'd been making additional investments for years, investments he kept separate from our main accounts. Money that was never in the accounts you've been stealing from." Lisa collapsed into a chair, the lawsuit papers crumpled in her lap. "This will ruin us. The legal fees alone will bankrupt us." "You should have thought of that before you decided to commit multiple felonies." Derek stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "You vindictive old witch! We were trying to help you!" "Help me?" I laughed, and the sound surprised even me with its bitterness. "You were trying to put me in a facility I never chose, sell my house without my permission, and steal money I'd never given you permission to touch. Exactly which part of that was helping me?" "You're old," Derek shouted. "You're confused. You can't take care of yourself anymore." "I'm 72 years old, Derek, not 92. I have all my mental faculties. I can drive, cook, clean, and manage my own affairs perfectly well. The only confusion I've experienced was trying to understand how my own daughter could betray me so completely." Lisa looked up at me, her face streaked with tears.
Mom, please, we can work this out. We can fix this. Fix what? The fact that you've been systematically stealing from me for months? The fact that you've been planning to strip me of my independence and my dignity? The fact that you've been lying to my face while plotting to destroy my life? We weren't going to destroy your life. Really? Let's see. I pulled out yet another folder, this one containing the brochures Derek had shown me. Sunny Meadows Senior Living, $4,200 per month. With my supposed assets, that would have lasted me exactly 14 months before I'd be transferred to whatever Medicaid facility had an opening. Did you think I wouldn't do the math? Derek's face went even paler. We would have taken care of you. With what money? You've already admitted you spent your savings on deposits for schemes that depended on stealing my inheritance. Lisa buried her face in her hands. Our children. Oh God, our children. The college funds. Perhaps you should have thought about your children before you decided to gamble their future on your ability to defraud me. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek stared at the lawsuit papers as if willing them to disappear, while Lisa sobbed quietly in her chair. I felt a moment of regret seeing my daughter in such pain, but then I remembered the way she'd patted my hand while explaining why I needed to sign away my life. There's something else you should know, I said finally. The will you found in my filing cabinet, the one that leaves everything to Lisa, that's no longer valid. Derek's head snapped up. What do you mean? I mean, I changed my will months ago. Everything now goes to charity, the American Cancer Society, and the local animal shelter. Lisa will inherit my grandmother's china and Harold's war medals, but that's all. Lisa's sobbing intensified. Mom, please, I know we made mistakes, but— Mistakes? I interrupted. A mistake is forgetting to call on my birthday. A mistake is being late for dinner. What you did was deliberate, calculated fraud. You spent months planning how to steal my money and destroy my independence. Derek stood up, swaying slightly. We need a lawyer. We need to fight this. With what money? I asked.
According to your own admission yesterday, you've spent your savings on deposits you can't recover. And I guarantee you that any lawyer worth hiring will want a significant retainer up front. Well, figure something out, Derek muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm sure you will, but while you're figuring things out, you should know that copies of all these legal documents have been sent to the district attorney's office. Elder abuse is a felony in this state, Derek. So is fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Lisa looked up at me with desperate eyes. You're going to have us arrested? I'm going to let the legal system decide what happens to you, just like you were going to let the legal system decide what happened to my assets once you gained power of attorney. Derek grabbed Lisa's arm. We're leaving. We need to call a lawyer right now. As they headed for the door, Derek turned back to me one last time. You think you've won, but you haven't. We'll fight this. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. We'll show everyone that you're a vindictive old woman who can't tell the difference between help and harm. I smiled at him, the same smile I'd been giving him for 5 years when he called me Mom and pretended to care about my well-being. Derek, I said softly, I've already given depositions to 3 different lawyers, undergone cognitive testing by 2 independent psychiatrists, and provided detailed testimony about your activities to the district attorney. I've also had every conversation in this house recorded for the past 6 weeks, including the ones where you discussed your plans to handle my finances. Derek's face went completely white. You recorded us? I recorded everything. Your discussions about my supposed mental decline, your plans to sell my house, your schemes to access my bank accounts, your celebration when you thought you'd successfully defrauded me, all of it. Lisa started crying again, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Mom, how could you do this to us?
How could I do this to you? I stood up, my voice rising for the first time since this whole conversation began. How could you do this to me? I'm your mother, Lisa. I gave birth to you, raised you, loved you, supported you through every crisis and celebration of your life. And you repaid me by plotting to steal everything I had and lock me away like an inconvenience? We thought we were helping, Lisa cried. You thought you were helping yourselves to my money. Derek grabbed the door handle. Come on, Lisa, we don't have to listen to this. But Lisa didn't move. She sat in my chair, crying and staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. I'm sorry, she whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know you are, I said, my voice gentler now. You're sorry you got caught. After they left, I sat in Harold's chair and looked around my living room, at the family photos that would need to be put away, at the life that would be forever changed by what had happened here today.
I felt no satisfaction in my victory, no joy in my revenge. I felt only the deep, aching sadness of a mother who had lost her daughter to greed. But I also felt something else, relief. For the first time in months, I was truly safe in my own home, surrounded by my own possessions, free to make my own decisions about my own life. Harold would have been proud. 3 weeks later, I was reading the morning paper when Henderson called with an update that was both satisfying and heartbreaking. The district attorney has decided to proceed with criminal charges, he told me. Derek is being charged with elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft. Lisa is being charged as an accessory to fraud. I set down my coffee cup, my hands steadier than they'd been in months. What does that mean for them? Derek could face up to 5 years in prison if convicted. Lisa might get probation and community service since she didn't initiate the scheme and showed some reluctance during our recorded conversations. Some reluctance. I suppose that was better than enthusiastic participation, but not by much. There's something else, Henderson continued. Derek tried to declare bankruptcy yesterday, but the court rejected his filing. Apparently, you can't discharge debts incurred through criminal activity. That meant Derek would lose everything, his house, his car, his business. The very assets he'd tried to steal from me would be liquidated to pay his legal fees and the restitution the court would undoubtedly order. And Lisa? She's asked if she could meet with you. She wants to apologize. I looked out my kitchen window at the bird feeder Harold had installed years ago, watching the cardinals and blue jays fight over the last of the winter seeds. What do you think? I think that's entirely up to you, Mrs. Patterson. You don't owe her anything. After Henderson hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about the daughter who used to help me bake cookies for the church social, who used to call me every Sunday just to chat, who used to bring her children over to play in the backyard where she'd grown up. That afternoon, I called Lisa. "Hello, Mom." Her voice was small, defeated. Nothing like the confident woman who'd explained why I needed to be moved to a facility for my own good. Henderson said you wanted to talk. Could I come over, just for a few minutes? An hour later, Lisa sat at my kitchen table in the same chair where she'd spread out the paperwork that was supposed to steal my life. She looked older, worn down by 3 weeks of legal consultations and sleepless nights. "I brought these back," she said, pulling a manila envelope from her purse. It contained the signed documents that had supposedly given them access to my accounts, along with copies of everything Derek had photographed during his unauthorized visits to my house. "I also wanted to give you this." She set a small key on the table. "It's the spare key to your house. I know you'll want to change the locks, but I thought you should have it back." I picked up the key, remembering the day I'd given it to her. "This was for emergencies," I said. "I know. We turned it into something else." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the grandfather clock in the living room tick away the seconds of our ruined relationship.
I keep trying to figure out when it started, Lisa said finally. When Derek's ideas started making sense to me. When I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a problem to be solved. When did Derek's ideas start making sense to you? Lisa wiped her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from her pocket. I think it was after Dad died. You seemed so lost, so vulnerable. And Derek kept saying that we needed to protect you from yourself, that older people make bad decisions when they're grieving. I was grieving, Lisa. I'd lost my husband of 47 years, but I wasn't incompetent. I know that now, but Derek was so convincing. He showed me articles about elderly people being scammed, statistics about seniors losing their savings to bad investments. He made it sound like we were being responsible, like we were protecting you. He made it sound like you were protecting his inheritance, you mean? Lisa flinched. Yes, that too. Did you ever stop to ask what I wanted? Did you ever consider that I might be capable of making my own decisions about my own life? We thought we knew what was best for you. No, Lisa, you thought you knew what was best for Derek. There's a difference. She started crying again, quiet tears that ran down her cheeks like rain on a window. I've lost everything, Mom. Derek is probably going to prison. We'll lose our house, our business, maybe even custody of the kids. And I've lost you. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be all right, to hold her like I had when she was little and the world seemed too big and scary. But she wasn't little anymore, and the world had become scary because of choices she'd made. You didn't lose me, Lisa. You threw me away. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Will you? Or will you regret getting caught? She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I regret all of it. I regret listening to Derek. I regret not standing up for you. I regret treating you like you were already dead, instead of like you were my mother who needed support, not supervision. I studied her face, looking for signs of the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. She was still there, buried under layers of guilt and bad decisions, but she was still there. What about your children? I asked. How are they handling this? Lisa's face crumpled. They don't understand why Daddy might have to go away, why we might have to move, why Grandma doesn't want to see them anymore. The children. I'd been so focused on Derek and Lisa's betrayal that I'd barely thought about my grandchildren, innocent victims of their parents' greed.
I never said I didn't want to see them, but after what we did, what you and Derek did has nothing to do with them. They're children, Lisa. They don't deserve to lose their grandmother because their parents made terrible choices. Hope flickered in Lisa's eyes. Would you consider seeing them? Maybe not right away, but someday. I thought about 8-year-old Emma, who loved to help me garden, and 5-year-old Jake, who always asked me to read him the same bedtime story 3 times in a row. Well, see, I said finally. But things will never go back to the way they were, Lisa. You've made sure of that. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you really understand what you've done. You didn't just try to steal my money. You tried to steal my dignity, my independence, my right to live my own life on my own terms. You were willing to lock me away and forget about me so you could live comfortably on money you'd never earned. Lisa nodded miserably. Derek said you'd be happier in a facility with people your own age and activities designed for seniors. Derek said what he needed to say to get you to go along with his plan. But what did you say to yourself, Lisa? How did you justify treating your own mother like an obstacle to your financial security? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. I told myself we were doing it for the kids, for their college funds, for their future.
I told myself you wouldn't really miss the money, that you had more than you needed anyway. And you believed that? I wanted to believe it. It was easier than admitting we were stealing from you. At least she was being honest now. It was too little, too late, but it was something. What happens now? She asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices. You and Derek will go through the legal system, and you'll learn what it's like to have other people make decisions about your life. And us? Is there any chance we could ever... I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd once been the most important person in my world, and felt the full weight of what we'd both lost. I don't know, Lisa. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight, and I'm not sure I have enough time left to try. After she left, I called Henderson to let him know about our conversation. She seemed genuinely remorseful, I told him. Remorse is good, Henderson replied, but it doesn't undo the damage. Are you considering dropping the charges? No. What they did was wrong, and there have to be consequences. But I am thinking about the children. What about them? They shouldn't suffer because of their parents' mistakes. I want to set up trust funds for them, for college and whatever else they might need. Small ones, nothing extravagant, but enough to give them options their parents' choices might have taken away. Henderson was quiet for a moment. That's very generous of you, Mrs. Patterson. It's not generosity, it's responsibility. They're my grandchildren, and they're innocent in all this. I'll draw up the paperwork. 6 months later, Derek was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Lisa received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. They lost their house, their business, and most of their assets. But Lisa was allowed to keep a small apartment where she could raise the children while Derek served his sentence. I kept my word about the trust funds, though I never told Lisa about them. The children would learn about the money when they turned 18, along with a letter I'd written explaining why their grandmother had made sure they'd have opportunities despite their parents' mistakes. As for me, I lived quietly in my house, tending my garden, reading my books, and enjoying the independence Derek and Lisa had tried to steal from me. I changed the locks, updated my security system, and made sure my new will was filed with 3 different law firms. Sometimes I missed the daughter I thought I'd raised, the one who used to call me every Sunday and brought her children over for Christmas morning. But I didn't miss the woman she'd become, the one who'd been willing to trade my freedom for financial security. On quiet evenings, I'd sit in Harold's chair and think about the choices that had brought us all to this point. I'd made my choice to fight back, to protect myself when no one else would. Lisa and Derek had made their choice to betray the trust of someone who'd loved them unconditionally. We all lived with the consequences. But at least I lived with them in my own home, surrounded by my own possessions, free to make my own decisions about my own life. In the end, that freedom was worth more than any inheritance Derek had tried to steal. Harold would have been proud, and for now, that was enough.